Knives are cool. And axes too.
Hola, me llamo Juan. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo? ¿Por qué me hablas así? ¿Quién eres tú? Oiga, vos, ¿quieres pelear? ¡Peleamos pues! ¡Venga! Okay, yes, that was all in Spanish. I want to do a video today on the Navaja, the Spanish Navaja. And I don't own a Spanish Navaja, but I got something the other day that is very close to one. And I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about that real quick and explain to you what the Navaja is. I was in Honduras for 7 years as a missionary, and I carried a little pocket knife, and I showed it to somebody one time, and he goes, tú tienes una Navaja. You've got a Navaja. So Navaja is the Spanish word for pocket knife. But to me, you know me, I love history. Where does that come from? Well, in the 1600s or so in Spain, they would carry a sword, a rapier, and they'd have their rapier. It was a very thin little sword that they fought with. But as time went on, it was harder to get money, harder to carry a big sword. Everybody could tell that you carried a big sword. So the Spaniards made what they call the Navaja. And again, I don't have an original Navaja from the 17 or 1800s. I wish I had one. I'll show you some pictures of those. They're pretty incredible, pretty beautiful. But they were long folding blades that once it was out, it was almost like a mini sword. And they would carry one of those in their belt like this. And that way, nobody knew if they had one or not. Or maybe they felt they wanted to show it. And so you're a Spaniard and you're going to town and somebody messes with you, you pull out your Navaja and you get in a Navaja fight. Now let me show you how they got in a Navaja fight. Let me get something real quick, I'll be right back. So I've got my little poncho, or not poncho really, it's a little blanket, but they're very thick. And in those days in Spain, they would walk around with one of these for shade, because when you're in a hot sun like today, you'd want to put this over you and cover yourself up so you don't get tanned. But whenever they'd have a Navaja fight, a knife fight, a lot of times they would put this on the left side, use it kind of like a shield, and two men would go after at each other. And if he'd strike like this, the guy would try to block it with this. And the other guy would block. And it was just like the old gladiator days. A knife in one hand and a shield in another, like a net or something. There was a movie that I saw as a kid many, many years ago. And I always thought that was so cool. And I forgot what that was, and lately I decided, hey, I'll look that up on YouTube and see. And sure enough, I found it. It's called The Pride and the Passion from 1957. Has Cary Grant, Frank Sinatra, and Sophia Loren in it. Now usually I don't tell people go watch a movie, you know, because a lot of movies are evil and wicked and bad. But this movie is more like a documentary how Spain fought against Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars. And in that movie, there's the most historically accurate knife fight where Cary Grant, they give him a Navaja, that kind of like this. And he has to fight this big Spaniard dude, and they're doing this and this and this. And that's, man, I wish you could just find that knife fight and watch it. But that gives you an idea of what a Navaja was like. Now, this right here is a Browning, huge pocket knife. But this is what a Navaja would have looked like. I don't have a Navaja. It would have been very long like this and a very long blade, probably even longer. I mean, sometimes they were over a foot long, so they're like a little mini sword. And very small blade. But you carry that in your pocket and people will see it hanging out. So they carried it around like this. Sometimes they'd show that they had one, like, hey dude, don't mess with me, I know how to use my Navaja. Other times they'd hide it. But this is how people in the 1800s in Mexico and Central America and country like that, and especially over in Spain, would do it. And this was their EDC, their everyday carry. It's also their concealed carry, because they couldn't afford a gun. A lot of times guns were too expensive, so they'd have their little Navaja. Now, open that sucker up. Look at that. 6 full inches of blade. Could you imagine that going into you? Ooh, that'd be a deep cut. And then cutting you like that. Now, again, I don't have a Navaja, so this is just a representation of what the size and everything is. But I wanted to do a video on this because I love Spanish. I found out my great whatever grandmother on my grandmother's side supposedly came from Spain. So we might have some Spanish blood in us. It would be interesting to find out. But I do like Hispanic things, and I do like history, and I do like the idea of that's what they would have had as their everyday carry. Unfortunately, things like this aren't allowed anymore in many countries. When I was in Honduras, they didn't even like you carrying a little knife. They called it an arma blanca. I don't know why they called it that. That would be a white arm, like a white sidearm, I guess, because when you open this, it kind of reminds you of white because it's kind of shiny and silver. But that was what they used in the old days to protect themselves, self-defense. And boy, if they were skilled in knife fighting, that would cut pretty deep. And oftentimes, there was a death if there was a duel. But that's how they did it. Had the old thing up here, and hey, let's fight. So I thought I'd bring that to you today. I wanted to talk about that. Love history, love studying. So look into Navaja, N-A-V-A-J-A, Navaja. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Knives are cool. And axes too.
Bullseye.